Hello, YouTube. Before we get into this fascinating subject, I need to explain something about the lands that I'll refer to. When we speak about the Rus, I ask you not to base your knowledge on modern Hollywood representation of history and events. Because as you probably know, those who write scripts for the shows do not possess even basic grasp of history of, let's say, the ancient city of Novgorod, and are pressured by the overall ideological party line to introduce ethnicities and events that had played no role in reality. There is nothing wrong to create fictional and fantasy worlds, but just understand, for those who know history and speak the language, this causes laughter at best and usually just derision. So let me explain about the Rus. What was that kingdom territory called the Rus? It was a complicated entity, and you will see that there are repercussions that lead into the present and into a number of conflicts. Well, the Kievan Rus, the official dates were 862 to 1242. It was a medieval political federation located in modern-day Belarus, Ukraine, and part of Russia or Russia. So the latter was, that's the name for the Rus, a Scandinavian people, okay? The name Kievan Rus is a modern-day 19th century designation, but has the same meaning as the land of the Rus, which is how the region was known in the Middle Ages. The Rus ruled from the city of Kiev, also given as Kiev, city of my birth, where I spent my adventurous youth in. So Kievan Rus simply meant the lands of the Rus of Kiev. The Rus are first mentioned in the Annals of Saint Bertin, which records their presence in a diplomatic mission from Constantinople to the court of Louis the Pious in the year of 1839. The annals claim that there were Swedes, and this is possible, but their ethnicity has never been firmly established. The story of the arrival of the Rus in the East is first told in the Primary Chronicle, also known as the Tale of Bygone Year, about the 12th century, and those who watch my videos about paranormal Eurasia and ancient Rus will recognize this reference. So, this work relates how the people of the land invited the Rus, identified as Scandinavian Vikings, to rule and maintain order in their country in the mid-9th century AD. Three brothers, including one named Rurik or Rurik, in his language, accepted the invitation and founded the Rurik dynasty, which would last for over 700 years. So sometimes when you hear me say Russian, when it refers to the Antiquity 1,000 years ago, I refer to the Rus. But some of the traditions have survived and are found in Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine. See how complicated things can get? And for example, Russia claims to be the direct descendant of the ancient Rus. Ukrainians do too. So things start, boiling over. And you can see how rivalries can get into history. Now, let's leave geopolitics of antiquity behind us and concentrate on the subject. Magical Russian food. So how to recognize other people's thoughts, how they did it before. Well, let me tell you, it has long been believed in the Rus and later countries in its territory that food has magical properties. For example, they could tell about what a person thinks, what he is concerned about, or how to protect him or her from bad intentions. So bread has always been a sacred meaning, trust me. We would never throw away a piece of bread in the Soviet Union, not the way I was brought up. And I remember how difficult it was to find food during World War and after. And I know about World War II because my father told me he barely survived as a small child wandering through the country. when the Nazis attacked Soviet Union. So bread is something sacred. Now, in the pagan period, it served as treba, or offering to the deities. The tradition of breaking bread bound those who ate this bread with close ties. This is why in Russia there was a ritual when bread and salt were brought to the guest. It was a kind of test. It was impossible to deal with someone who refused to break a karavai, type of Slavic bread. Bread is also used in Holy Communion. And now about the salt. Well, there were many signs about the salt. The most famous, and I always remembered, if you spill it, then there will be a quarrel. If a neighbor came in the evening to ask for salt, she was considered to be a witch. And if the girl oversalted the food, then the family understood that she was in love. Shi, or cabbage soup, is probably the second most popular soup in the Rus and Russia today, and Russia, not Ukraine, after borscht. People love cabbage in Russia. Now, my wife is from Western Ukraine. She makes wonderful borscht. Trust me, some of the best, very unique recipe. But she doesn't make shi. And I don't know many Ukrainians who do, people in Ukraine. Now, the shi consists of cabbage and broth, with occasional addition of meat. Cabbage soup shi was supposed to be thick, rich, and fragrant, as they absorbed the thoughts and feelings of the hostess. Cabbage soup was also considered a symbol of a strong family hearth. If the soup was thin and tasteless, it could mean that the hostess was cheating on her husband or her thoughts were occupied by another man. So now we get into a subject that many of you might know about. We're speaking about kasha. In various Central and Eastern European countries, kasha can also apply to any kind of cooked grain. It can be baked, but most often is boiled, either in water or milk, and therefore the term coincides with the English definition of porridge, but the word can also refer to the grain before preparation, which corresponds to the definition of groats. This understanding of kasha concerns mainly Belarus, the Czech Republic, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, and the Republic of Moldova, Russia, Slovakia, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine, where the term, besides buckwheat, can apply to wheat, barley, oats, millet, and rye. All of them are good things. And buckwheat I already praised before. This is one of the main foods of the land where I'm from, and we eat it with great pleasure, and it gives you pure energy, and if you never tried it, I suggest you do. Kashas have been an important element of Slavic diet, but not only Slavic. People like Jews, for example, in Eastern Europe eat it. Also, people of other faith, I've seen them do it. So anyway, it's been element of the diet there for at least 1,000 years. The completion of any business in the old days was celebrated by eating kasha. They ate it from one bowl, letting the spoon go around in a circle. If someone refused to eat, it means that he was planning something bad against the host of the house, of the family that was the host of the house. Now, let's talk about milk. Now, milk was considered probably the most magical product in the Rus. This product of a living organism, which has the most powerful energy, was used in their rituals by white magicians and black magicians. According to legend, with the help of it, they could cause damage. That was just designation of types of magic that they used. Now, if they wanted to figure out the culprits of the damage, so to say, milk was poured into an empty pumpkin. They tied it with a clean cloth, and it was hidden in a secluded place near the threshold. When a person suspected of causing damage came to the house, the pumpkin was taken out and looked at. If the milk turned sour, it could mean that the spoilage really took place. And then we come to sugar. Well, sugar, by the way, was used by the famous Bulgarian visionary Vanga to get information about her clients. Because thanks to the crystal structure, this product is able to absorb human energy. This method was also known in the Rus. If a person held a piece of sugar in his or her hands and after that it turned dark, then the person was either sick or his thoughts were dark. A sorcerer or witch sometimes asked to bring them a piece of sugar with traces of the teeth of a person about whom they wanted to know something, and told them what was on his mind. And now let's move on to honey. Many products were enchanted to achieve some magical goals. Honey also belonged to such products. If a guest brought honey into the house, they were in no hurry to eat it. They looked at what would happen to it. If the honey was getting dark, then the guest had bad intentions or he was a sorcerer. It was possible to give charmed honey or enchanted honey to a person who was suspected of something bad. As soon as he tasted such honey, either he became ill or he confessed his secret thoughts against his will. Apples, according to beliefs, protected from witchcraft and corruption, contributed to the understanding of other people, made it possible to find out their secret thoughts. They were used in many magical rituals. In particular, with the help of a charmed or enchanted apple, it was possible to find out what this or that person thinks about you. To do this, the apple was cut in two halves, the core was removed, and a number of other manipulations were carried out, which helped to find out the truth. Most often, plots for apples were used when it came to love relationships. Now, mushrooms. Mushrooms. By eating charmed or enchanted mushrooms, a person could see and hear hidden things. I'm sure a number of people in the West will not refute this notion, and not only the West. However, this was probably due to the fact that mushrooms were used in magical rituals, the eating of which led to hallucinations. For example, the fly agaric, which I mentioned in my other videos about mushrooms. In principle, judging by numerous Russian and Rus beliefs, any food under certain conditions could acquire magical properties and allow you to learn the secrets of other people. Now, to make it a little bit more complicated about that part of the world, let's talk about the Kazakhs. Kazakhs, or Kazakh, was a member of people who were dwelling in the north hinterlands of the Black and Caspian Seas. They had a tradition of independence, and finally they did receive privileges from the Russian government in return for military services. Originally in the 15th century, the term referred actually to semi-independent Tatar groups which formed in the Dnieper region and caused a lot of harm to the neighbors, and of course the neighbors caused harm to them as well. The term was also applied by the end of the 15th century to peasants who had fled from the serfdom in Poland, Lithuania, and Muscovy to the Dnieper and Don regions, where they established free, self-governing military communities. In the 16th century, there were 6 major Kazakh hosts: the Don, the Greben in the Caucasian mountains area, the Yaik in the middle of the Ural River, the Volga, the Dnieper, and the Zaporozhian, mainly west of the Dnieper. Now, the Don Kazakhs, in Russian, Donskие Kazaki, or Donians, or Donцы, are Kazakhs who settled along the middle and lower Don River. Historically, they lived within the former Don Kazakh host, Donskoye Kazachье Войско, which means which was either an independent or an autonomous, you can call it democratic republic, in a way, in present-day southern Russia and parts of the Donbas region, from the end of the 16th century until 1918. As of 1992, by presidential decree of the Russian Federation, Kazakhs can be enrolled in a special register, so to say. A number of Kazakh communities have been reconstituted to further Kazakh cultural traditions, including those of the Don Kazakh host. The Don Kazakhs have had a rich military tradition. They played an important part in the historical development of the Russian Empire, maybe good for Russians, maybe detrimental for other people who had to be subdued by them, and they participated in most of its major wars. Today, they are fighting against the Ukrainian military forces in the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war. Not all of them, but definitely some. And on the other side, descendants of the Zaporozhian Kazakhs are fighting against the Russian forces. Okay? Now let's talk about a very interesting food that they consume. It's called nardek, one of the most unusual dishes. See, traditional Kazakh cuisine is famous not only for first and second courses, but also for a variety of desserts. One of them is the famous watermelon honey, or nardek, to the production of which bees have nothing to do with. What is it? How is it done? And what do they eat it with? Nardek is a consequence of good harvests in the 19th century agriculture, in particular in cultivation of melons when it reached flourishing in Russia. You see, before socialism was introduced with bayonets against the people of the Russian Empire by communists who came in, overall there were good harvests. Definitely there were also years of starvation due to nature and improper seedings, but overall Russia was gaining steam as an economical power, Russian Empire, before 1914 idiotic war, the First World War I, which caused, creation of fascist and communist regimes and brought grief and calamities to the lands of the former Russian Empire and other territories. Anyway, at that time, I'm speaking about the market was oversaturated with watermelons. In this regard, the question arose about the processing of berries, because that's what watermelons are, so that the harvest would not be wasted. Watermelons were salted, fermented, mixed with cabbage, and even boiled, getting the so-called watermelon honey, nardek. See, nardek is a consequence of those good harvests, of agriculture, and something had to be done. So what to do? In this regard, recipes appeared according to which watermelons were fermented, boiled, salted, and not only that. As a result of cooking, the famous Kazakh honey, nardek, appeared. To prepare it, it was necessary to collect small but already ripe watermelons. Previously, nardek was cooked in every Kazakh Don family, buckets full of it. In order to prepare this dish, it was necessary to cut the watermelon, the berry, into two parts and remove the pulp with a spoon. Next, it had to be rubbed through a fine sieve, which gave the pulp a liquid consistency. Then this juice was simply put on the stove and cooked. The contents were kept on fire until it thickened to the consistency of honey. It is noteworthy that the honey came out 7 to 9 times less than the juice was poured. The quality of honey was checked by putting a drop on a saucer. It had to stay in the same position and not spread. That's how they checked it. It is also interesting that no additives to honey were required. Neither the original honey nor sugar was added to the dish. After cooking, the honey was cooled and placed in small clay pots. It had to be stored in a dark and cool place, and basements were often used for this. I think cellar was maybe the better word for it than basement. Now, I remember living in Ukrainian villages, and the cellars full of food that would not spoil. Those very interesting memories. Anyway, the Don Kazakhs ate nardek with bread for breakfast or for tea. This dish is very sweet, but it is not too high in calories, only 100 calories per 100 grams of honey. The product has other advantages. It has a positive effect on the functioning of the cardiovascular system and stomach. So, I wanted to give you an overview of the history and people who made it and what those people ate, and how sometimes they used it in their magical ways to protect themselves against harm and against calamities. And it's a fascinating history to me, and I'm sure to many other people, and I think it would be great if the world knew a little bit more about the ancient Rus and what happened after that. I know you see the war, but there is more to the whole history and to the whole territory that is involved in this. So that's what I wanted to let you know. And please, if you like my research, you can support me. You can find out how to do it through PayPal. Another means in the description to this video. Please tell others about my channel. Please subscribe to it and like my videos, and I'll bring you more interesting videos about Eurasia and other parts of the world. Some of them I had visited myself. Thank you.